We keep things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. It has been our favorite time of the year, the football extravaganza. We've heard from some of our best friends their predictions, who they thought was coming out of the NFC and AFC, their MVP, their Super Bowl predictions. And we've even heard from our own co-host, our own kin, about who they thought is going all the way this NFL season. We spent an entire winter and then an entire spring talking about Caleb Williams and getting ready for an NFL season. But the ultimate treat has finally come. Christmas has came early, right before kickoff. Joining us is one of the voices, one of the minds that we appreciate in this industry to give us our North Star when we need information. You can check him out. He is the co-creator over at Bootleg Football. You can check out all the draft analysis because he is a senior draft analysis over at City Gridiron. Check him out over at X at Football EJ. He is our friend. He is your friend. He is EJ Snyder. EJ, how's it going, brother?
Mike, it's great. Football's back. We are on the cusp of the regular season. The Bears look like they've put together a decent squad. Hope springs eternal.
So let's start right there, right? Let's start here in Chicago. All the noise has kind of come to fruition. We have finally gotten to the point where all the conversation throughout the last season of Justin Fields, the 4 games of Tyson Bagent, and then Lovie Smith being the hero of Chicago a few years back, all of it coming down to one moment in Caleb Williams being selected. You have always had your finger on the pulse when it comes to Chicago Bears, but then putting your expertise on what you see during the draft season, when you're doing your scouting, when you're gathering your information to see what happened with the Bears at number 1, making the right pick, all things, whether it works or not, making the pick they had to at Caleb Williams, and then landing with Rome Odunze. Let's start there where it all began at that draft night. What were your thoughts after seeing those 2 picks land in Chicago?
I was thrilled, and I ended up saying the same thing that Holes did later on that we got to see in Hard Knocks and the draft analysis stuff that came out of the Bears, which was, this is a perfect evening. Like, this is exactly the way that we hoped it would land. And I had hopes that it would work out that way. I did not have a ton of faith that it would work out that way. I truly thought Odunze would get picked before 9. I was dead sure they were going to take Caleb, and that's really the most important thing. But Odunze at 9 is not some consolation prize. This is a guy that's going to be a very good receiver in the league for a long time. And for the Bears to do both of that before pick 10 elapsed is tremendous for the franchise. It is a huge head start. Those guys have trained together. They certainly teased that on social media. They had talked about ending up at the same place. It all worked out, and it was fantastic. Tough to say that a lot of times as a Bears fan when you're watching the draft, but the first night unfolded perfectly.
So setting up that night was what Ryan Poles did with Carolina and making that pick. And now we've seen DJ Moore is a part of this team and the future of it. And when you're allowed to bring in somebody like Keenan Allen, because you have DJ Moore, you can extend him. You have this rookie contract. You draft Rome Odunze. He has this receiving room to grow up in. You got this star quarterback you're hoping for. Going back to that trade, how much of an impact in the history books? We know the impact of it right now and next year, but long-term in the NFL, how are we going to look back at that trade, that time where we thought the Bears giving up the rights to Bryce Young or CJ Stroud and ending up with Darnell Wright would impact possibly the NFL the next decade plus?
And possibly longer, let's be honest. If Caleb brings the Bears back to prominence, you got to put the Bears in perspective. And a lot of people have not thought about the Bears if they're not Bears fans in quite a long time because the Bears haven't been relevant. The Bears are the largest single market in the NFL. They are not the largest city in the NFL, but every other larger market city-wise has 2 teams. So the Bears are the largest single market in the NFL. The NFL desperately wants the Bears to be good. If the Bears are good, it's better for the NFL product. And the NFL's been prodding the Bears like, come on, come on, come on, and they haven't been able to make it happen. If Caleb Williams brings this sleeping giant back to prominence, takes him to the playoffs, wins some games, ends up with a Super Bowl appearance, win or not, it is massive for obviously Chicago football, but also for the larger NFL. And when you go back and talk about how will history books remember that trade, it really depends on how well Caleb does. Now, early returns are extremely good. We never know. We all think he's the guy. We'll see. If he turns out to be the guy, it's going to be massive. We're talking about quarter century stuff. People still talk about the 85 Bears. It was a long time ago. If Caleb brings the Bears back to any level of competence nearing that team, forget about it. It is over and done with, one of the biggest trades in NFL history.
EJ, I'm barely old enough to remember Jordan's run. I remember the last 3 championships, so I have no memory of the 85 Bears. My championship teams are that run with Pritz at halftime and Devin Hester is the man of the hour, Hall of Famer. Shout out to Hester. And then we've had some good teams. Jay Cutler was a thumb injury away from maybe getting the Bears over the hump. Again, a double doink. Like, there has been a lot of moments in my lifetime as a Bears fan that we have seen them kind of try to get into that echelons and just never able to do it. This feels different. I've always, at least heading into this draft, post-draft, I kind of made the comparison that in normal years, in the multiverse, if you're a Marvel fan, in the multiverse, the Bears end up with J.J. McCarthy or Drake May, and they end up doing a Bears thing. This is the one that Doctor Strange says to Iron Man. This is it, the one. And I want to caution Bears fans. It might not work. The numbers are all over the place. Chances are Caleb Williams will be a good NFL quarterback. But this is where context matters. And I want to get your thoughts on this on the quarterbacks all around the league, like a Jaden Daniels. But for the Bears specifically, and maybe even Washington, you have to put into context who they are replacing. What is the legacy of that franchise? This isn't Green Bay. This isn't New England. This isn't Kansas City. This isn't Dallas, where they've had big-time quarterbacks. These are moments that fan bases are going to have to learn. New fan bases of generations have to learn. These quarterbacks that are coming in, including Caleb, including Jaden Daniels, including Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, who unfortunately got injured but will be around. Is this one of those years where some of these franchises that haven't had that type of quarterback might finally feel like they have struck gold?
Absolutely. I think without a doubt. Will all of them? No, numbers say that they won't. Will more than one of them? Looking at this crop and the early returns, yes, absolutely. I think Chicago is definitely one. I think Jaden Daniels, who is a very good quarterback, was my number 2 quarterback. Absolutely, with some help in Washington, can turn that franchise around. He's got some things he needs to work through, as all rookie quarterbacks do, but the talent is there. You've already seen the flashes in the preseason. The same with Drake May. The same with JJ, and basically his one preseason start before that unfortunate injury. There were flashes of NFL skills, things you need to do at the quarterback position for your team to win consistently. And out of that group, yeah, I would say at least 2 of those guys are going to make their franchises very happy they selected them. You can never tell with injuries or anything else. But as I said with Caleb, like, all the skills are there, all the mental skill set is there. Really, it's up to the football gods. It's up to who he's surrounded by, injury luck, everything else. But yes, multiples of this quarterback class will definitely lift their franchises.
So let's go national, because we could talk about the Chicago Bears all day with our friend, your friend, one of the best in the business, EJ Snyder. Check out all his work over at Bootleg Football. Also a wonderful source. He's the senior draft analyst over at Second City Gridiron. EJ, nationally, like, we could do Bears talk all day, but nationally, the league is stacked. It's always wanted parity. And since I've grown up, it has been a parity league. And the NFC North is a great example of that. Heck, the AFC North has been an example of that. How excited are you for the competition we're going to see this season in particular? Let's say, for example, in the AFC East, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy and somewhat of what the kind of quarterback he can be. Before we even get a little bit more specific, this particular season, how excited are you to kind of see some of these matchups, some of these quarterbacks, some of these defenses, the package, the presentation the NFL is going to give us this year?
It's going to be very good. As you've said, parity has, let's just say, run rampant in the league for a long time. And that's been traditionally shown by the fact that there are 4 teams that go from out of playoff contention into playoff contention every year, and 4 teams that do the reverse. And that happens like clockwork and has for a long time. That is, a quarter of the league changing hands up and down in significant ways every season. That is what a lot of leagues strive for, because it makes every game interesting. It makes games towards the end of the season more interesting, certainly more than the NBA. The regular season is relevant. Fewer number of games puts more importance on each one. The NFL has thrived off all of that. So they love that parity. We're seeing that parity shift now to places where it hasn't necessarily been. The AFC South is going to be an absolute dogfight. There are great young quarterbacks in that division. The NFC North is evened out in a way that we haven't seen in some time. It's still Detroit's division to lose, but I don't just put them as a shoe-in to, oh yeah, they're going to win the NFC North. They've got a lot more competition and from different places than they've had it in the past. Again, New England's had a couple of down years, depending on how fast Jacoby Brissett plays well or Drake May replaces him, depending on your stance as a Patriots fan. They're going to be, knocking on the door. That's still Buffalo's division, but Miami's right there. They're not going to give it up. So as you look across these divisions, you mentioned the AFC North, always an absolute bruiser, kind of alley street fight every week. They beat the hell out of each other in the regular season. That's just good for football. And you could go on. The NFC West has got, the Rams are back. The Cardinals are going to be plucky. Mike McDonald's not going to be an easy out in Seattle. Like, it goes on and on. It's still San Francisco's division, but again, not a shoe-in. And the NFL's just got to be sitting back at this point, licking their chops, going, oh yeah, ratings gold mine.
So I want to talk about QBS in a second. And I want to give a shout out to your co-host, Brett, because you guys do a great job of breaking these things down. You guys went through the entire NFL, throughout the entire divisions. You guys talked about them. Check it out over at Bootleg Football. We'll leave a link down below if you're listening to us on YouTube, if you're watching the video, because it is a great resource as you get ready for your fantasy draft, as you're making your parlays, your confidence picks. It is a way to go. But why don't we do a quick rapid fire before we get to that? And I want to get your initial thoughts, your quick thoughts when I tell you these names, these players or teams in the NFL. And we'll start off really easy, okay? The Philadelphia Eagles.
I think the Eagles are still going to be very strong. Howie's done a great job, and their secondary doesn't it have to be improved? It can't be worse. So I think they're going to be strong in that division.
Dallas Cowboys.
I think they might struggle this year. There's some things they do very, very well, but I think their window is smaller than it was last year.
The Chargers.
Chargers are going to be tough. You're not going to want to play them. I don't think their win total is going to be what a lot of Chargers fans probably want in the first year, or maybe believe in Harbaugh's first year it's going to be. It will be improved. The team overall is absolutely going to be improved. And the longer that Harbaugh regime goes, the more dangerous that team's going to get. I don't think they quite have all the pieces in place, but they are not going to be an easy out. They're going to be super physical and they're going to beat you up.
Do any of these quarterbacks overthrow Patrick Mahomes this specific season coming up? Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa.
No.
So
let's get that out of the way. This is Pat's league. Josh is very close in terms of a singular talent. He does not have the resume Pat does. He has a lot of the skills Pat does, and I hold his skills in very high regard, but it is not over Mahomes. Let's be clear. Mahomes is number one, and everybody else is playing for second.
Does any quarterback have a hotter seat than Lamar Jackson?
Oh, I think lots of quarterbacks have hotter seats. They might just not be in as prominent of positions. I mean, when you look at quarterbacks for teams that we say pretty much like don't have a quarterback, if you're looking at the Giants right now, they know they're stuck. If you're looking at the Raiders, I like Aiden, and I wish they would play him because I think he is an unknown commodity, whereas Gardner is a known at this point. But if you're looking at those teams, all those guys' seats are hot. Like, if they could get, I was thinking about this at lunch. If the Raiders could get Chris Oladokun, who's the backup in Kansas City, who's played really well in the preseason, do you think their win total is greater or lesser than it is with Aiden and or Gardner? And I would say it's at least even after he adjusts to the system. At least even with maybe a higher ceiling. So if you're talking about a guy that's excelling during the preseason as a backup, as possibly being better than your starters, look, your team's quarterbacks are on the hot seat. So
and this is the last one because I want to get into getting smart in a second. Is there anybody that overthrows Kansas City this season?
I think they've got as good a chance to three-peat as any team in the modern era. They are very, very tough down the stretch. They showed that they could play some pretty bad football for more than a half a season last year and still win the Super Bowl. Like, what else is there? Like, you dogged it for half the season. I know they weren't dogging it. They were working things out. They did not play great football for half a season, still won the championship. Okay.
What are you supposed to do? Like, that is
What are you
literally
supposed to do?
it's the cheat code. And until
Yeah.
that bad man at tight end, quarterback, or coaching leaves, it just is what it is. And we just got to figure out the rest of the league. And just joining us for just a few more moments is EJ Snyder. You can check him out all over the universe. Check him out at X at Football EJ. He's a senior draft analyst over at Second City Gridiron, and of course the co-creator over at Bootleg Football. And I want to talk about QBS because this is something that I learned, and I want you to take the last few seconds to really hit on this, because I think Justin Fields last season is somebody who really is a person, a athlete, a quarterback that really can use this type of stat in so many different ways that we can really have a smart conversation about it, because it was all situational with Justin Fields. Tell me about QBS, and tell me, if you're a Bears fan, how it projects for somebody like a Caleb Williams.
Okay, so lots to dig apart there. I appreciate you bringing it up. QBS is quarterback support. It's a stat that Arjun Menon and I created last season. I comes from me being stupid. I tend to ask questions and go, doesn't somebody do that? Can't somebody figure that out? And if the answer is no, I go, I bet I can do that. And a lot of times I'm wrong. I learn a lot in the process. This time I happen to be right. And what it is a measure of how much support across the board a team presents for its starting quarterback, regardless of who that is, how that team sets the table for team success relative to its peers in the NFL. And it wraps up 3 offensive statistics, a defensive stat, and a special team stat as well, because all those things contribute to the situation the quarterback is placed in. And a lot of people, I'll give you a quick example, said, well, defense shouldn't be in there. Well, if your team's giving up a 40 burger every week, do you get to play the same offense? Do you get to play patient, have run game? No, like your playbook diminishes, you're under pressure, you have to go for it. All those things influence how you play as a quarterback. And there are lots of measures how you play as a quarterback. There's EPA per play, there's average depth of target, there's stats for the quarterback all day long. This is the stat for the supporting cast, and largely it reaches into things like the front office too. How well did you stock their roster? How complete are you as a football team? So if we say this is the way the table was set for all these guys, and then we look at how they performed with all those established quarterback metrics that I didn't make up, we can compare the two and say, what's the differential between how well you should have done and how well you actually did as a quarterback? And that gets into QBDD, which is quarterback difficulty differential, and really says, what's the difference there? But QBS is the metric of the team to say, how good are you at setting your quarterback up for success? In Chicago's case last year with Justin Fields, a lot of people, because of the results, said, oh, I bet his QBS is going to be in the toilet. And this is a conversation a lot of teams and fans have is, oh, well, if everything was better, he would be better. Turns out QBS for Justin Fields last year in Chicago was absolutely middle of the road. It was about 17th in the league. I mean, dead middle average. Wow. Now, there are people that did better with that, and there are people that did worse with that. Justin actually did, relative to that, okay, not great, but the idea that he was without any support isn't necessarily true. Now, we can get into the minutia. Again, QBS is sort of an umbrella stat. We can get into Luke Getsy's play calling, and I'd be unhappy to delve back into that. But it's a measure that, again, is apples to apples for everybody in the league to say, hey, this is the measure your team gave you to succeed as a quarterback. So it makes for some interesting conversations once you understand what it is. And that's really all I was trying to do, all we were trying to do when we created that stat. So I'm glad people are interested in it. There's been a ton of conversation around it. A lot of folks have really dug in, which I think is the measure of success, whether or not they like it or they're trying to tear it apart. If they're interested enough to sort of read to the end of the book, I think that's a success because it creates better conversation about football and it makes smarter football fans.
EJ, before we let you go, is there anything that you promote to your people here in Chicago? You know, this is your home here. We know how much love you got for Chicago. Anything you can promote so that people here can get smarter, and we know that the conversation is going to change because the Bears have a whole new spotlight on them. So any way people can support you and where they can get smarter by following your work?
Absolutely. The best place is Bootleg Football on YouTube. Check it out. We've got 3 things per week. We've got a recap pod on Mondays coming out. We've got a Thursday night live stream for every Thursday night game during the season. And we have a preview pod that comes out on Friday. That's really our edited piece for the week that talks about the upcoming matchups that really interest us. So that's the best place. Got some other projects coming down the pipe. Everybody will certainly hear about them when they land. But for now, thanks for the opportunity, Mike. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it.
You've been awesome, brother. You know that you're a brother of ours here in Chicago. Make sure you guys are going to X for all your up to the second information. Game day. God, week 0 is here. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Check them out at Football EJ, Senior Draft Analysis over at Second City Gridiron, and of course over at Bootleg Football. EJ Snyder, brother, thank you so much for joining us here on the Sports Cubicle.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for reaching out.
You're the best. We got whole lot left here on this edition of the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado.